Some men are born to fight, others are forced into it by circumstance, and then there are the rare few who seem to carry the destiny of combat in their blood. József Kreul Bugner, known to the world simply as Joe Bugner, was one of those men. Born in Szőreg, Hungary, on the 13th of March 1950, Joe's earliest days were defined not by the glamour of sports or the lights of the ring, but by survival. His family, like so many Hungarians in the 1950s, found themselves caught in the chaos of the Soviet invasion after the Hungarian Revolution of 1956. Tanks rolled through the streets, freedom was crushed under iron treads, and Joe's parents knew that if they wanted a future for their children, they had to leave everything behind. The Bugners fled west, eventually finding themselves in Britain, a land of grey skies, factory towns, and the promise of safety. The journey was not easy. At first, the family was placed among nearly 80 refugees in a hostel at a Wisbech factory. It was cramped and uncertain, but to Joe, even as a child, it felt like the first step towards something larger. Growing up in St. Ives, near Huntingdonshire, Joe didn't have the privileges of wealth or comfort. What he did have was size, strength, and an almost magnetic presence. At school, he discovered an ability to excel in physical pursuits. By 1964, he was already a national junior discus champion, proving that he wasn't just a big lad, he was an athlete with balance, power, and coordination. But discus wasn't where destiny was waiting. At Bedford Boys Club, under the guidance of trainer Paul King, Joe slipped on a pair of boxing gloves for the first time. The moment his fists tightened, his path began to take shape. He wasn't a natural brawler. His style was careful, measured, defensive. But there was something in his composure that suggested greatness. He had only a short amateur career, 16 fights, 13 wins, before a critical choice presented itself. His friend and trainer, Andy Smith, believed Joe would be better off going professional early, where his opponents could be more carefully chosen. So, in 1967, at the young age of 17, Joe Bugner turned professional. The transition wasn't smooth. On the 20th of December 1967, at the London Hilton, he lost his debut by TKO to Paul Brown. Many fighters would have disappeared after such a start, but not Joe. Instead, he used the defeat as fuel. Over the next 2 years, he stormed back, winning 18 consecutive fights, 13 of them by stoppage. The kid, who had once fled Hungary, was now making noise in the boxing halls of Britain. By 1970, Bugner was no longer just a prospect. He was a contender. That year alone, he fought and beat established names like Chuck Wepner, Manuel Ramos, Brian London, Eduardo Corletti, and George Johnson. His record and size, standing at 6 feet 4 inches, 193 centimeters, with a fighting weight of around 225 pounds, 102 kilograms, made him impossible to ignore. But boxing isn't just about fists, it's about opportunities, and Joe's big one came in 1971. He was matched against Henry Cooper, the beloved British heavyweight hero who had once floored Muhammad Ali. The fight carried the British, Commonwealth, and European titles. There was a catch. Joe was technically too young to fight for the Commonwealth crown. He had to wait until he turned 21. When the fight finally came, it was a war of attrition. Cooper pressed forward, Joe relied on his jab and reach. And after 15 grueling rounds, the decision came down to a single judge, Harry Gibbs. Bugner won by the slimmest possible margin, a quarter of a point. The result divided Britain. Fans adored Cooper, and many believed he'd been robbed. Bugner, a refugee-turned champion, became a target of scorn. He was booed in arenas and vilified in the press. Yet history remembers what the scorecards declared. Joe Bugner, still only 21, was the new heavyweight king of Britain. Joe Bugner wasn't just fighting for belts, he was now facing the best heavyweights of his era. And what an era it was. The 1970s heavyweight division is considered one of the deepest in history, dominated by names like Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, and George Foreman. In 1973, Bugner first tested himself against Ali in Las Vegas. Though he lost by decision, he impressed many with his toughness and defense. Later that year, he faced Joe Frazier in London. It was brutal. Frazier floored him in the 10th round, but Bugner got up and rallied, nearly staggering Frazier before the bell. Though Frazier won on points, many observers said it was one of the toughest fights of Frazier's career. Ali himself would later remark that Bugner had what it took to be world champion. His trainer, Angelo Dundee, agreed. By 1975, Bugner got his second crack at Ali, this time for the World Heavyweight Championship in Kuala Lumpur. The fight was held outdoors in blistering tropical heat. Joe fought cautiously, relying on his defense, but Ali controlled the pace and won a unanimous decision. Critics accused Bugner of being too passive, but he defended his strategy. In that kind of heat, reckless aggression would have been suicide. Still, Bugner's place was cemented. He wasn't just a British or European contender, he was among the best heavyweights in the world. The roller coaster, retirements, and comebacks. Boxing is as much about the mind as the body, and Bugner's career reflected this truth. By 1976, just 26 years old, he shocked fans by announcing his retirement. He claimed his heart was no longer in the sport, but boxing has a way of pulling fighters back. Later that year, he returned, demolishing Richard Dunn in the first round to reclaim the British, Commonwealth, and European titles. For once, Bugner fought with fury. Observers said if he'd always fought with that kind of aggression, he could have been world champion. Yet, consistency wasn't his hallmark. After a close decision loss to Ron Lyle in 1977, he walked away again. The 1980s saw sporadic comebacks. He fought Ernie Shavers in 1982, but was stopped due to cuts. He beat contenders like James Tillis and David Bay, but a high-profile loss to Frank Bruno in 1987 at White Hart Lane marked another exit. Then came the 1990s. Inspired by George Foreman's miraculous comeback, Bugner returned once more. In 1995, at age 45, he won the Australian heavyweight title. In 1998, at 48, he stunned the boxing world by beating James Bone Crusher Smith for the World Boxing Federation (WBF) heavyweight title, making him the oldest man at the time to win a version of the world crown. His final fight came in 1999, at 49 years old. His record stood at 69 wins, 41 by knockout, 13 losses, and 1 draw. Bugner wasn't just a boxer, he was also an actor. In the 1970s and 80s, he appeared in films with Italian star Bud Spencer, often playing the villain. In 1994, he was cast in Street Fighter alongside Jean-Claude Van Damme and Raul Julia, cementing his cult status in cinema. He also dabbled in business. With his wife Marlene, he opened a vineyard in Australia, but the venture collapsed in 1989, costing him millions. Financial troubles, combined with injuries like a severe back problem, often dragged him back into the ring. Bugner's personal life had its ups and downs. With his ex-wife Melody, he fathered 3 children, James, Joe Jr., and Amy. He later remarried and settled permanently in Australia, where he became known affectionately as Aussie Joe. He also had a fiery personality outside the ring. On the set of Cinderella Man, where he was briefly hired as a boxing advisor, he clashed with Russell Crowe, famously calling him a gutless worm and a fucking girl. In 2009, he even appeared on reality TV, joining the cast of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, Final Years, and Death. By the 2000s, Bugner's health had begun to decline. A combination of financial struggles, injuries, and the toll of decades in the ring left him vulnerable. Still, he remained a beloved figure in Australia and Britain, often invited to boxing events as a living link to the golden age of heavyweights. In 2013, he published his autobiography, Joe Bugner, My Story, reflecting candidly on his life, his regrets, and his triumphs. On the 1st of September 2025, at a care home in Brisbane, Australia, Joe Bugner passed away at the age of 75. For many, his death marked the end of an era, the passing of a fighter who had faced legends, survived controversies, and carved a unique place in boxing history.